Welcome to the RareErth podcast, a place where I bring in rare individuals to have rare conversations. My name is Manoj, your host, and now let's get the show started. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the RareErth podcast. My guest today is Rahul Kolle. He's a speaker, he's a coach, he's a consultant. He is an electronics and communication engineer by qualification, but he's extremely passionate about storytelling, presentation, and the art of public speaking. His day job currently, he works with Cisco as a customer experience engineer in helping people to professionally upskill. But apart from that, he has done a lot of side gigs. In fact, he is an experienced presenter and public speaking coach, personally trained over 5,000 professionals in the art of public speaking. This conversation is so much fun because it is a lot of information and breakdown of the art of public speaking. We dive deep into the nuances when you're on stage. We discuss storytelling. We talk about some of the mistakes that we do and what to avoid. We discuss what are some of the things that you can do to really have a great first impression. So this episode is actually loaded with a ton of tactical advice and tips to take your speaking game to a completely new level. So come join with me in this amazing conversation with the one and only Rahul Kolle. Okay, Rahul Kolle.
Yes.
Okay, Rahul Kolle, welcome to the RareErth show. And this is a podcast which is audio only, so people really will miss out the handsome dude.
First of all, commendable job at getting my surname. Very few people do that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So nice to know that I got it right. I think maybe it's a matter of being a localite.
It's not actually. It's strange where I come from. It's Kolle is a Konkani. I'm a Konkan, first of all. For all the Konkani people out there, hello. Kolle in Konkani means fox.
Ah, okay.
Not like Megan Fox, but like the witty fox. And it's funny how this comes about. It's because it's a story. It's a fable that many generations ago, my great-grandfather was an influential person in a village, and usually these are the people who had a well in their backyard. And a fox one day got trapped in the well, and my great-grandfather helped the fox get out of the well, and since that day we've been Kolles.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's seriously the story?
That's actually the story, yeah.
Wow, man, that's amazing. Okay, do you like the name or you have a feeling towards the fox and all that?
No, it's a preference simply because my first name doesn't make for good SEO. Kolle is a rarer name, and since it's on the RareErth podcast, I think it's a better name to have.
Wow, that's a good start to our show.
Yeah.
I want to start with something very interesting. So you are a speaker, you're a coach, you're a consultant, you work with Cisco, and you also do a lot of other gigs outside of that.
Yes.
And we will get into the bit of really the art of speaking and the art of really having a great stage presence and things like that. That's your forte. But I want to start with one video of yours which I saw on YouTube. Okay, and in that video you really explain the science behind infrared cameras.
Okay. Oh wow. Okay, that was a long time ago. Awesome.
So do you recollect that video and what you explained then?
Like a lot of the things I studied in engineering, no. Yeah.
So when was that? That was which year? I think you were doing.
I think it was my 5th semester, which was 2017 types. Wow. And I do remember, that was actually a joke. I do remember what I said in the infrared cameras video because I'm a huge cricket fan. Okay. So that's how the inception of the project came to be. When our digital signal processing teacher said, go and do a project, the first thing I thought about was Snicko and Hotspot in cricket. And because I'm a mad, crazy cricket fan, that's the only thing I could think about. And we got to the bottom of it and got to the digital signal processing part, which I don't remember. I do remember the cricket example.
I won't get into that. Yeah, but then, so that was like how many years back then?
That was about 4 years back.
4 years back. What was interesting to see was even then, you were very presentable and you were very articulate. Right. So I'm really curious, what went into your DNA that you have this skill, or is it a matter of training? Is it nurture or nature?
I think it's a bit of both, in fact. I was pushed onto the stage at a very early age. When I first set foot on stage, I think I was maybe 4 or 5 years old.
Wow.
And it was a fancy dress competition. I had just one line. I was dressed as a fisherwoman and I had to say, Machhi le lo, Machhi kharid lo. And I cried on stage. Okay. That was my first gig. But jokes aside, I've been on stage ever since. So even though professionally I started public speaking and doing gigs and as a professional speaker maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I've been on stage ever since I was a kid.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So I think that really paid off well in terms of how you show up today at various stages, and it's really good. I want to just confess, back in my 7th or 8th standard, I was really very fascinated with the idea of ability to speak in front of people, and I was really searching for the answers then. And this was, I don't know, maybe 15-20 years back. And there used to be these book sellers on the street where you get these pirated books.
Yeah.
So I picked up a book from Dale Carnegie, okay, and on public speaking.
Right.
And I thought it was one of the best books I ever stumbled on. And it's like filled with gems on public speaking. So I really do not know whether that translated into me becoming a good speaker, but I think there are some lessons which still I can remember, which was instrumental in really building the confidence and things like that. So
Correct.
I'm really excited to have you to speak on that very subject.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. You are an electronics and communication engineer.
Yep.
And so why did you really go on to choose and build something in this space? Like, why didn't you go ahead and just take on a very conventional approach to a job and not focus on anything else, just the job and a 9 to 5 kind of a thing? Why are you really passionate about doing something outside of that?
So I did do that. In fact, I did take a 9 to 5 approach and pick a job. The reason why I'm still holding on dearly to my passion and my hobbies is because it makes me feel alive. Nothing else makes me feel alive and gets my heart racing as much as public speaking does. So when I finished in fact, I was supposed to become a doctor. I was all set out to go and become a doctor after my 12th grade. I prepared for my CETs, and my rank didn't turn out to be all that good to get me into medical school. And the other alternative, as you all know, listeners, is engineering. And I wouldn't say that engineering was bad. I didn't have any particular hatred to it. Engineering let me experiment with so many different things I cannot tell you. Gave me a perfect platform. I also want to give a shout out to my college, my alma mater, BMS College of Engineering, which gave me all the chances to explore and juggle with the things that I wanted to. Yeah.
So becoming a doctor was your dream or something that your parents really were keen on you pursuing?
My parents did want me to become a doctor. At the same time, I liked biology. And I also had in mind that, so in 9th and 10th, I studied in one of these schools where you had an option to pick offbeat electives. All my friends went and picked computer science.
And which school was that?
This was Bethany High School in Kormangla itself.
Okay.
And all of my friends went and took economics or computer science. Most of them took computer science. The commerce kids took economics. I was one of the 12 students from the entire batch of 800 students or so who took dramatics and theater. And it was mostly because I ended up taking theater because a lot of cute women were taking theater back then. And I enjoyed being on stage. I enjoyed speaking. So that made me, one of my core subjects is biology. So that was the one that I had interest in. Even in 11th and 12th, I took up biology and not computer science. So biology was the one science subject that I was good at. And because I was good at biology, taking medicine was a no-brainer sort of an option to me. But then when you write your CET exams, you also need to do well at physics and chemistry, which I didn't do.
So your biology passion did not translate into interesting chemistry with the girls later, did it?
No comment.
All right. So that's how you went on to becoming an engineer.
Yeah.
Okay.
That also I took electronics and communication because computer science wasn't my cup of tea. I didn't learn how to code. So that's why I took electronics and communication.
Do you still aspire to really pursue something in your line of what you picked up as study?
Interesting. Work is giving me the chance to do that. So I work at Cisco for listeners, and it is directly related to what I studied in engineering. It is communications, networks and the internet and 5G and all of that. So I do get chance. There are lots of upskilling drives and there are certification exams where I get to learn the latest technology and keep up to date with the industry standards.
All right.
So that part of my curiosity is taken care of with the job that I'm in currently.
You feel you are right on track with whatever you're doing, whatever you studied.
Yeah. The common perception is people do engineering and then do all sorts of other stuff not related to engineering.
Right.
But for me, it was directly related to my course of study.
Okay, awesome. And speaking in front of audience, right? It's one of those scariest thing, and I do not know whether you relate to that, but most of the people who have no background with any kind of stage experience, if you suddenly, mostly people have that experience when they're actually in some kind of gathering. It could be a family gathering, it could be you're brand new to an office and suddenly somebody asks you to, why don't you introduce yourself? And that could be their very first exposure to an audience. So the question that I want to ask you is, when you had that, when you were a little grown up, your very first exposure to an audience of sorts, how was that for you, and could you recollect that experience?
I remember this clear as day. I'm glad you asked me this question. It was 7th grade,
Okay.
first month of high school, and we'd all grown up and started to hit puberty. So we cared much more about the other sex's opinions. And it was generally a very difficult time to be in school because you were constantly seeking approval of your tribe, your immediate tribe, which is not your family anymore. In high school, your immediate tribe becomes the people you hang out with. So getting their approval and validation becomes everything. So you start caring about what people think a lot more. And it was a pick and speak competition in school. We had a literary fest, went up on stage. I had a chip on my shoulder that I'd been doing this for a while now, and it doesn't really faze me. But I got one of those oddball topics that I knew nothing about.
And what was the topic?
It was an image of a globe with a cone on top. And it was supposed to be one of these creative topics that you build a story about. And I went blank because what can you say about a globe with a party hat on top of it? Nothing, right? Now I can say a whole bunch of things, but back then my mind went blank. And then I went up on stage and it was just silence. I was nervous after a long time.
Right.
My knee wouldn't stop shaking. My hands were shivering. I grasped the podium because I wanted to regain stability and control. And the podium started shaking because I was shivering and was nervous in a really bad way. And it was supposed to be a 1 minute, 60 seconds is for how long you were supposed to speak. I spoke for 37, 38 seconds and walked off stage. And I couldn't make eye contact with anyone else for the rest of the day. It was bad.
What was your internal narrative at that point when you were on stage?
It's funny because...
Do you recollect that?
Yeah. In fact, I was reading this. I've been reading a lot of Stoic philosophy of late. And one of the lines was that our favorite person in the world is ourselves. We love ourselves the most, yet we worry about everybody else's opinions and not ours.
So true. Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. I wanted to say witty things. I wanted to say funny things. I wanted to come across the way that I had envisioned in my head. And that is sometimes not possible in public speaking. Sometimes you just got to embrace the uncertainty. And that's what I didn't do. Yeah.
For many of us, when we have such an experience for the very first time, the pain of embarrassment is so high that we could actually make a very silly decision in our mind, or based on that experience, that what, never again. I don't want to be in that space ever again. So either you really get good with your craft, or you just completely disown it and say, you know what, I'm never getting back to that situation ever again. So how did you make a positive decision then? Like, you could have chosen not to pursue that as something that you want to really get good at it. You could have chosen that as, oh, this is not for me.
So I deal with such situations in a very immature way. And I think that's helped me along the way. I'll tell you what this is a little bit more. When something bad happens, let's not say bad, when something happens that I didn't expect in a negative light, I become a very spiteful person and I come back in vengeance. So that day, during that 7th standard high school literary fest, everyone else did well on stage. All my peers did well. These are people I spoke to every single day. These are people that I hung out with. And after the event, I got sympathy for not doing well. That's what sparked that flame in me, that the next event, I'm going to get all of these people. So that vengeance is what helped me come back. And I know this is not the best way to deal with things.
No, I think that's fine. It worked for you, right?
It did, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that's interesting. So if that had not happened, still you would have gone ahead? Do you think it would be the case, or?
I haven't thought about it. Maybe I would. Maybe I am quite stubborn sometimes when it comes to things that I care about, things that I'm passionate about. I am very stubborn and I am very shameless. Shamelessness, I use it as a strength, as a skill to have. If you're shameless and you have a thick skin, you can keep coming back without that perception that, oh, what will people think this time? Do I have something to prove? You don't have that feeling. It lurks at the back of your mind, but it's not big and scary.
It's interesting coming from somebody who's as young as you, 24, who were instrumental in encouraging you in your early on life. I feel people who really just give you a pat on the back in the early stages of life, they are really instrumental, even though they may not be the best people, but they just shape us in taking decisions in a positive direction. Who was instrumental in your life early on?
You're right when you say that appreciation plays a big role. If you're doing great work and you're not being appreciated for it, how do you know? You don't, right? So you need people around you who are creating that atmosphere for you. For me, it was the perfect environment at home. My parents are my biggest cheerleaders. My mom is somebody who cheers me irrespective of my performance. But my dad's somebody who is more real, more critical, and more... In fact, before I was this passionate about my hobby, he was the one who was passionate about it more. He loved seeing me going up on stage. So that perfect atmosphere at home was a blessing. Aside from this, I've had some great English teachers along the way. Primary school, in high school, in 11th and 12th. Yeah, I think in 11th and 12th was a changing point. I want to take a name here. My English teacher in my 11th and 12th, who I'm still in touch with today. I got on a call with her about 3 days back. Her name is Smita Chako. She was a great believer. And when you have these believers by your side, you feel like you can go to war with anyone. So some of the teachers that I've had along the way, and of course my parents, were the biggest cheerleaders.
That's really a deadly combination, I must say, because as we grow up, we really look at these two categories specifically, parents as well as our teachers, and getting encouragement from both those groups. I think you were really lucky to have that, though.
True.
And so what was the biggest accelerator for your growth apart from that? So obviously you have a very favorable and encouraging setup, but how did you get committed to this craft of yours? Okay. And how did you accelerate your growth? What did you do?
You know, like Naval says it, do what seems play to you and work to others. It seemed like play to me. I was genuinely having a ball when I was up on stage. For other people, it was, hey, I need to prove a point today. Hey, I need to do well. I need to gain validation. But after that initial spurt where I gained that confidence, ki, haan, theek hai, I can do a decent job on stage. It was like a playground to me. I would just go and experiment with a bunch of stuff. Sometimes do irresponsible things, but that's okay. It was play to me. It still is. So that was my biggest accelerator, I feel. That perspective that even if this doesn't go well, it's fine. It's just a day out in the playground.
So you actually have a ball when you're doing this. That's the whole perception that you have about your speaking gig.
Correct.
Awesome. What is the one thing you were really scared of doing? Looking back, you were really very scared, but you feel that you should have started sooner.
I have not felt this strangely. I have not felt that I've had to start sooner because, at least for the first half of your life, if you're growing up in a tight-knit family, it's mostly your parents taking shots, calling shots for you, or the elder ones at home calling shots for you. So I didn't feel like I missed any bus early on, but there is something that I did deal with. I'm still dealing with it, which is the fear of missing out, which is, I think, an entire generation is dealing with this fear of missing out. It is a real problem.
Right.
It's big, stares you in the face and tells you that you're not good enough. And I think I still am dealing with it. Yeah.
What aspect of fear of missing out you feel you're missing out?
It's, you want to put a price tag on things you do when things get professional. When you put a price tag on things, when you want to be less busy, when you want to do the things that only excite you, you feel like, hey, am I letting go of opportunities because I'm being too pricey? Am I letting go of that gig because it's paying me 10,000-15,000 less? So that is something that translates into fear of missing out. And you sometimes feel like gigs like these have helped me come this far. Should I turn my back on those? That's something that translates into FOMO.
And how are you dealing with it?
I'm not. I'm just not. So I'm just using the blanket principle that have an aspiring hourly rate. If you're not learning something, if you're not having fun, or if you're not making the kind of money you want to, don't do it. But if it's one of these three things, then do it. And this lesson was drilled into me by Nikhil Joyce, whom I think you might have seen on Twitter. Nikhil Joyce was a mentor whom I interned for back in my first year of college. He always says that if you're not having fun, or if you're not learning something new, or you're not making money, don't do it. So I put that FOMO under a blanket and justify it by saying it's none of these three things.
That's interesting framework of thinking. That's really interesting, man. And could you tell a little about your mentor? How was it working or alongside or learning alongside?
Nikhil Joyce is a great person to work with. Still is, I would say. I learned a lot of things with him from him in the first year of college. I interned at his startup called Eventosaur, which has now been sold to Matrimony Bazaar. And a lot of the things that I had a chip on my shoulder for during my college days, knowing the nuanced subjects from the startup world, which my friends didn't know about, or things that I spoke about, jargon that I used in conversation, and my friends were like, "Oh, dude, what's that? Can you explain?" Those things gave me a chip on my shoulder, and those things were a direct consequence of working with Nikhil Joyce and Tejavant, who got married last week. So happy married life, Tejavant, TJ. Yeah.
Okay, I think the time of release of this podcast and this may vary, but then we'll convey the vision.
Yeah.
Okay, so coming to the meat of the discussion, so let's get into public speaking. Okay, as we discussed, this is one of those dreaded experience people have. Do you think there is any specific age for people to really get good at this art form? Like you had an early start in your life, which has really been fantastic. Okay, and that shows in the following years. You fell in love with that craft of yours.
Right.
You think somebody who has no idea of public speaking, has zero skills in that department, you think they can really start now?
100%. It was November 2020. We ran a 5-day virtual public speaking workshop, and we had about 20 participants. One of the participants was a mother of two who was in her late 50s. And she's undergoing a coaching certification from International Coaching Federation, and she's somebody who wanted to get over her fear of public speaking. And she said that she has perfectly fine English. She converses really well. There's never an awkward moment with her. But when she used to go in front of a crowd, she used to blank out. And she tells me she found the 5 days extremely useful, and she's been practicing every day since. And apparently, she's seen dramatic progress over the last 2 to 3 months. So it shows that a step in the right direction is all you need to take to get yourself started. And once that happens, you see a domino effect. One slab falls over the other, and suddenly you see yourself making leaps and bounds in progress. That initial spurt. It's like going to the gym, right? When you go to the gym, first 6 months you have incredible progress. You have all these muscles that you never knew existed, and then the going gets difficult. After that first growth spurt is when you see things slowing down. But everyone can take that first big leap. And that's possible.
So age is no bar. Anybody can make up their mind and really make a beginning in that direction.
Exactly.
Okay.
And one more thing is, English isn't our primary language. We weren't born with English. We have our mother tongues, which are very different. Public speaking doesn't always mean speaking in English. You could be a brilliant speaker in your mother tongue.
Right. Yeah, I think that's another myth that people really hold on to, thinking that I'm really not good at English. Especially, I feel very strongly that we Indians have this, that if the moment we think we do not know English, I think we feel we are completely unskillful. What do you think about that?
It's garbage. I think we should rubbish this thought. I want to, again, tell you a story. I don't know if this will make the final cut, but I'm going to take a name here. No, actually, I'm not going to take a name here. He was my math teacher in the 12th grade tuitions. Brilliant teacher. Got me to love math. To this very day, I think math is a weak point for me. On the first day of tuition class, everybody had heard about this person but never really seen him. So it was like a legend walking out in front of us. This person whom we had heard so many stories about but hadn't really met. We were all excited, hanging on to every word he was saying. And I studied in Koramangala. So Koramangala is a fairly cosmopolitan crowd. Not a lot of people speak Kannada. I speak Kannada fluently, and I pride myself for it. He came into class and said, "How many of you don't know Kannada?" First day of class, math class. We were all like, "Oh, this question's out of place. Why is he asking us this? How many of you don't know Kannada? Please raise your hands." And maybe 40% of the class raised their hands, and he said, "Get out."
Wow.
He said, "Get out." And I said, "What? How is he asking me? What? This makes no sense. And I was revolted by what he said. We should be accepting of everyone. And then he followed up with, hey, I'm kidding. Maths artha agilla andre no problem. Nan jokes artha agbeku. Which means if you don't understand math, it's fine. You need to understand my jokes. He was such a passionate teacher. He spoke in a bit of, English and Kannada. And even the folks who didn't know Kannada got every word he said just because the intent was clear. So he's my biggest example of English is no barrier to be a fantastic speaker.
Rahul, that was a very interesting tidbit from your college day. I think what a great example. People, as long as they are really having the conviction in their own subject or the message, then language is not a barrier as such,
Definitely
right?
not. Yeah.
Cool. What are some major mistakes when it comes to speaking that you notice with people?
Okay.
This could be a whole category,
it's
but
a
yeah.
big list. But one that's been very evident off late because of the virtual world that we've been living in is people presenting. When speakers present instead of converse, it's a problem. You should talk to people, not at them. So when you present, it's almost as if you're hiding behind your message and saying, this is my information, take it the way you want to. What you should be doing instead is, hey, guess what? I have an piece of information for you and I think you'll like it. Here it is. There's a huge difference between the two. So people, please don't present, converse. Chat with your audience. Talk to your audience. Even if it's a formal setting, formally, if you're presenting your message, converse with your audience. Don't talk at them. Don't speak at them. Speak to them.
That's one mistake, okay?
Yeah.
Anything else which comes to maybe two other?
This is a frequently used mistake in public speaking. It's been well established. Using filler words. I see this in cricket a lot where in the post-match ceremony, speakers, the cricketers come and say, just completely takes away from the impact of what you want to say, from the impact of your information. Filler words would be another. And the third problem would be, okay, this is an interesting one. I was at an event and there was an established speaker from the business fraternity who was supposed to go up and speak. And he began by these exact words. I'm not going to take names here, but he began with these exact words. Please bear with me for the next 15 minutes. I didn't prepare a presentation today. I'm not really prepared, but please excuse me. And that gives the audience the impression that you don't care about them enough to have prepared, that they are not important. And you're beginning by saying that, please bear with me for 15 minutes, which means the audience, it's like signaling to the audience that it's time to switch off, take out your phones and book that cab back home.
For some reason, if it's a narrative that you have while you go up on stage and that, hey guys, you know what, I'm really not prepared. It seems like you're being very transparent, but do you think that's being very irresponsible as a presenter?
Yes, that's because when you've made your way out on stage, you already have the audience's attention. So let your message pass across to the audience and let them take the decision whether they want to bear with you or not. By explicitly calling it out, what you're saying, you're putting out a disclaimer and a caveat that your information isn't interesting enough, that you're wasting people's time. What you should be instead saying is, I have something really interesting for you, pay attention. You're there, you're placed as a speaker on stage because it's something that the audience doesn't. You have that blessing, that gift by virtue of being a speaker. There's 100 people in the audience who want to be a speaker but can't be because it's something that they don't. So don't do injustice to it by going up on stage and saying, bear with me. Because that's as if you're saying that I'm doing this for the sake of doing it.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting points that you mentioned about the mistakes people do. Sometimes we walk into an audience and we really do not feel any energy back from them. It's like almost like a cold vibe. Okay. And people completely lose track of what they had come prepared with when you really do not get that, pitch and catch experience. How do we break through a completely cold vibe audience?
The audience here is not giving you a tough time. That's something that you should first understand. The audience is waiting to warm up to you. There is a deficit of trust when you begin speaking. especially if you're the first speaker, the audience doesn't know what to expect. They're willing with open arms to accept you, but it takes time. You can't expect them to be on the edge of their seats from the get-go, right? There are some occasions in which the audience is genuinely not interested. Maybe you're at a speaker's convention and the audience is waiting for a celebrity appearance and you're just a filler act before the main act comes on. I've been in situations like those where the audience doesn't want to listen to what you want to say. That's not your audience. Right. So stop worrying about what they have to say or what they have to think, right? If you feel like the audience is not reciprocating, do your job as if you're delivering your responsibility. Go ahead, do a good job. Give the few people, the few percentage of folks in the audience who may be interested, give them a chance to be interested. And if you do a good job, then they will be. But otherwise, I think it's wrong to expect and constantly expect from the audience. You need to give them something to care about.
So the audience needs to be the right kind of audience wherein they are very receptive to what you have to offer. But you have to introduce the element of interest for them to get hooked.
100%. It's like sales. If you don't want a washing machine, I can't sell you a washing machine. No matter how many sales strategies I put in place, no matter how many clickbaity ads I do, 10 seconds, you hear me out and you're going to take home this amazing offer. Not going to work because you just aren't looking for a washing machine, right?
Right.
There are a certain fringe occasions where you're delivering this extremely interesting topic. Let's take a topic from my industry. You're talking about 5G. You're at a speaker's convention. The entire audience is waiting for everything you want to say. But you're an expert. You're the expert speaker. Don't expect people to know everything. Begin from a big picture and funnel the approach so that you give everyone a chance to be on board with what you're saying. Maybe there's somebody who doesn't know about 5G but is waiting for you to change their mind. So take them also along. Don't leave them behind. And stories do a great job at doing this. Stories always work. Stories can map obscure concepts together and can make sense to even a child. So make use of them.
Great point. I think storytelling is something which is another whole department when it comes to speaking skills or the ability. So I read somewhere that if you can tell a story, you can move the world.
Yeah.
Okay. And how does one really get good with storytelling? And I struggle with this myself. I sometimes get to the point, like sometimes I may not want to build a story around a concept that I really want to present. I think really people have the patience to sit and listen to story. Why don't you cut to the chase and give me the meat of the topic? Sometimes I feel that way. But every time I listen to somebody who's actually presenting something with a story, I have always walked away with that information staying with me of some sort. So I'm really curious, how does one become a good storyteller? And is there a way to really hone the skill? Like how do we really... are there some set of stories that you should keep it in your arsenal and keep using them again and again? Or every time it should be a new set of story? How does it work? I know I asked you a couple of questions in there.
I think the point I would like to begin with is that we're all great storytellers. We're born storytellers. Everyone's a fantastic storyteller. The way we communicate predominantly is stories, gossip. We all love gossip. Gossip is the best form of stories. We love Bangalore Times because they give us the masala, they give us the stories behind the scenes, and we love it. We go on LinkedIn, post about our certifications. That's a story. We go on Instagram, post a picture about our vacation. That's a story. You're signaling to people constantly that you're living this good life. Now, this dates back to millions of years ago when we first appeared on the earth, face of the earth, right? Where you sat around a fire in the evenings and you, maybe, I don't know what the language back then was, but you told the rest of your tribe how your day was, how you went and hunted for this animal and you had a difficult time. You're glorifying what happened during the day. And that was the form of entertainment back in the day. You had meaningful conversations and everyone was capable of doing this. Everyone is capable of talking about their own lives. And everyone has interesting parts to their lives, even if they don't believe it. Like if I tell you now, like I'm sure, Manoj, that you've had 2 or 3 interesting incidents today.
Right.
Today. You just have to dig in. You just have to introspect and see what those are. Now, I would like to quote Kevin Hart here. Kevin Hart is one of my favorite stand-up comedians, and he said, when somebody asked him, how do you build your stand-up comedy material? He said, the reference point for me is my life, my family, my kids, everything that I go through. And I will never run out of stories because I'm living every single day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you're an infinite reserve of stories. There is one thing we struggle with though. Like you said, get to the point, right? Sometimes we struggle with contextual storytelling.
What do you mean by that?
Context matters. If you're talking, let's go back to that speaker convention example, right? If you're talking at a 5G, if you're talking about 5G, everyone wants you to talk about stories related to the topic. Not about how you got to that convention center in the morning and how you had difficulties booking a cab. Nobody wants to know that. So context is everything. If you're in a meeting, if you're in a work meeting, talk about things that are relevant to everyone. Relevance matters. So context equals relevance equals successful stories. Without context and relevance, you're shooting stories in the air, waiting for people to catch on to them, which will not happen.
So how does one develop the skill of storytelling?
One thing that's helped me is journaling.
Okay.
I started journaling right when COVID started, late March, early April. I felt like my days were being a blur. There were so many interesting things that were happening to me during the day that I was just not capturing. And 3-4 months down the line, I remember this amazing incident that happened so many days ago, and I wouldn't remember it in its entirety because we're living such a fast-paced life.
Right.
So now I've successfully journaled for almost a year. It's going to be a year in April. Every night I sit down and write the most interesting things that happened to me during the day, the things that I'm grateful for, the things that I found to be deeply satisfying. And that's a constant reminder that my life is mine. And there are so many things that happen that I can talk about. Many of my examples in my public speaking workshops come from these 15 minutes that I spend every night thinking about my day, or thinking about that podcast that I saw on YouTube, thinking about the latest Joe Rogan podcast and the amazing things that were said in that podcast. Yeah.
That's a interesting way to really catalog your life experiences.
Yep.
I feel when you start with an intention to document it, when you start your day, your mind is trained to look for those experiences which you want to really jot it down. Maybe it works the other way around, to really pay attention to your details of the day.
Could be. Yeah. I think that's a good way of looking at it. I've not looked at it that way so far. I'll tell you when that has happened. I was supposed to do this 100 days of creation or whatever, right? There's 100 days of code, there's 100 days of creating something. Right. So for those 100 days of creating something, I wanted my creatives to be interesting. So for that, I had to do something interesting.
You had to create.
Yeah. I had to make something from my days, and yeah, that's how reverse engineering.
Yeah, I think it has a dual benefit. I can look back and think, if I have a 100-day Instagram project of posting one picture a day, now I'm really looking with the eye for beauty. Like I want to really capture something which I can really present to the world.
Fantastic example. Yeah.
So I think, but journaling has a more of a sense of reflection to your day, I think, right?
Yeah, true. In fact, when I go on my runs these days, it's a good example. When I go on my runs, I finish my run and I obviously want to tell everyone how much I've run because, hey, I'm keeping fit. And yeah, so I look for these pretty pictures which I would otherwise miss. Pieces of scenery, pieces of some plants, or the lights on the roads, which I wouldn't observe. I am now observing because, hey, I got to post a story. I know it's not the best way of dealing with things, but like we said earlier, it works.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about the sense of constantly signaling? We are also driven by the idea of really, we want to signal to the world that, you know what, hey, we are doing well, we are working out, we are doing this gig, we are doing that. Things are like super good in my life. Somewhere we have been driven by this idea of signaling, and social media really amplifies the whole thing. So what do you think about that?
I have conflicted opinions on this. We're all putting ourselves in identity baskets today. I'm a coach, I'm a speaker, I'm a podcaster, I'm an engineer. We want to belong to these tribes. There's this whole concept of personal branding also now, where you feel like you got to associate yourself to a tag in order to stand out. Now, what that does is it materializes as a lot of signaling. Maybe it's good. maybe it's doing wonders for your personal brand. But if it's creeping into your mind, that's what I am. These are the tags. This is what I am. If it's limiting you in your mind, then I think that's a problem. Where it's fine if you love to work out. It's fine. Tell people you're a fit person. But if that creeps into your head and materializes as, oh, I need to work out today because I need to post that story, that's a problem.
You become a slave to that whole signaling.
Yeah.
Right.
I've been a victim to this as well.
All of us are. I think I think time to time we become victims to that because we get entrapped in that whole rush of being seen as a successful person or somebody who's doing cool things.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
And it's a good there's a good reminder that I've really stumbled upon, which is I normally look at my Instagram stories of what my friends have posted at night, right before I shut off my internet, and I have that 1 hour of no internet before I sleep. So before that happens, I just whisk through my Instagram.
Really, you have 1 hour of no internet before sleeping?
Yeah, I try to maintain that.
Not bad. Okay.
Yeah, and I normally read for about 20 to 30 minutes before I go to bed. It's normally recently I've been reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and it's really profound, but it also puts me to sleep, so it's good that way. But yeah, getting back to the point, I go through the Instagram stories and just tuck, click by click, then you move on. And then I realized I didn't spend even 2 seconds on that person's story. Why do I think my stories are that important?
Wow. I like that perspective. Yeah.
So does it matter if I take a pretty picture when I go for my evening run? Do people care? Answer is no, they don't. Right?
That reminds me of one of your videos that you had put on Instagram about when you go up on stage and you speak and you think, what would they think about you? The honest truth is nobody's thinking about you, right?
Yeah, everybody's thinking about how you are making them feel.
And it's a very hard lesson to really grasp because we still think what others think of us. I think it's just, you really, even though this on a theory level that nobody really thinks. If I ask that question to myself, did I really think of my best friend today? Actually, no.
Yeah.
But that has nothing to do with what I feel for my best friend. But you haven't really paid your attention to that thought of your best friend or your family as such.
Yeah.
Just that when you actually happen to see their photo or their name, some memory triggers and you may think of them. But otherwise, people really are not actively thinking about the closest people that they have. So that's interesting.
In the Jan of 2020, a whole bunch of new joinees had joined our company, Cisco. I'd spent about a year in the company back then. So they brought me onto a panel to talk about my experience so far. It was about a 20 to 30 minute segment. I grabbed the mic and I just wanted to make everyone feel comfortable. But I ended up pulling everyone's leg. So what happened was there were 200 new joinees. And I said, look at the person who you're sitting next to today. If it's a good looking guy or a pretty girl, you're doing your best to wear your best clothes to come across as the best version of yourself today. Do you think 3 months down the line, you will know who that person is? 1 week later, all of you will be assigned to different teams.
Right.
You will not even be in touch 3 months later. Why do you care? Why do you care about how you're sitting right now? Why do you care about laughing too loudly? Why do you care about snorting when you laugh? Just have a good time. Cut back, cut loose.
I think that will be appreciated after they spend those 3 months, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I think all of us, when we are in a new space, we really want to hold on and grab onto the person right next to us because that's the only person we know of. And it fades away. But you gave the truth right in the opening day.
And then that translated as awkward giggles throughout the audience. And I was like, oh, it's true. Yeah.
So coming back to speaking, do you have a framework of a speaking gig? Like when you go on stage, do you operate from a specific framework? Like the opening has to be this way, the meat of the subject and the closing. And so do you have a mental framework or it is always spontaneously changing?
I generally have a framework in mind.
You do? Okay.
Yeah. So suppose I set off from here to your place, which is Hebal. I check the Google Maps before setting off and then I have it on Bluetooth and it's telling me where to go. But I do check the maps once before setting off. I generally want to know which direction I'm going in. That's the same that applies to speaking as well. I generally know which direction I'm supposed to go in, what's expected of me, what I'm supposed to cover. And I use inversion theory that Charlie Munger has popularized over the years, which is what is the one thing that I must not miss out? Like I need to avoid this at all costs. These are the 3 big mistakes. I need to avoid these at all costs. I have those reminders constantly. Right? Don't mess up somebody's introduction. Don't mispronounce someone's name. Don't forget to thank somebody. Otherwise, that will lead to bad blood later. These are things that I stay away from. So unless you're prepared before the gig, unless you have that mental model of preparation, you're just taking situations as they come and you're being reactive and not proactive.
Did you learn those 3 lessons that you just mentioned the hard way, or was it?
I did have them as reminders, and then I made those mistakes anyway. I've mispronounced people's names a lot of times. That's something that's not fun on stage, especially not fun when the speaker comes on and then corrects me. So yeah, that's something that I avoid at all costs now. I think it helps to ask people how to pronounce their name in advance. It's like an insurance in case you mess up their name right in the future, because you're calling out like, hey Manoj, how do you want me to address you? Right? That goes a long way.
And also, my experience is, if you are the speaker for an event and there is somebody who's introducing you, if they really do a poor job of introducing you, then you really have to fight hard to gain back the trust of the audience. Is that true observation? Or it doesn't matter, if the speaker is awesome, anyway, speaker will shine regardless of the intro which has been done for the speaker?
If it's an elite crowd, it doesn't matter. But if it's an audience that is highly impressionable, especially the younger crowd, younger folk, just say going to a college cultural festival. And this happened several times where I've been invited as a judge to a college cultural festival and somebody butchers my introduction. Not so much my introduction as my name. Like I told you, right, you got my name. And puts up a very timid and lukewarm performance. Then the audience just switches off. They have no anticipation. You have so much of energy when you get 1,000 people in an auditorium, and then a not so great introduction just temporarily suppresses that energy. It's not ideal, but it's also not a deal breaker.
Right.
Yeah.
You had a chance to introduce speaker on a TEDx platform.
Yeah.
So how did you feel? Obviously, it's an honor to do that act. But what was the degree of pressure internally you were feeling, or were you excited, or did you feel very stressed out? What was your experience then?
We had a dry run the day before. I've hosted 3 TEDx events so far. 2 of them I was directly a part of because I was also curating the event. I was curating the speakers' performances. So I was involved in the back end as well. So there was no pressure because I knew them all very well. I had personally booked flight tickets for some people, so I knew them at that level. But there was one TEDx performance which was the most recent one. I had this at St. John's Medical College, a prestigious TEDx event. And we had a dry run the previous night, and I had dinner with all the speakers, but one, apart from one. Apart from one, I had a dry run with all of the other speakers, got to know them on a personal level, chit-chatted with them. So there was no nervous energy there. But the one person that I didn't meet, I ended up mispronouncing her name. I wasn't ready for it. I mispronounced her name, and then she corrected me on stage.
Oh, God. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's difficult, man. So,
that's difficult, yeah. But you got to play it off. You can't really show on stage that, you've taken, oops. You can't show it as a slip up. You just got to play it off, yeah.
Do you wish to be a TEDx speaker someday?
I have got a couple of opportunities. One opportunity, actually. One of them was me reaching out. But, when I think back in retrospect, I'm glad I turned down the one opportunity and I didn't get the other gig because, like I said, I'm 24. I don't know what I'll be talking about 5 years later. On a platform like TEDx, you go ahead and give this stellar performance. You're linked back to that forever. And that's something that I don't want to do at this stage. Because I genuinely don't know what I'll be talking about when I'm 27, 28. And I know I will be talking for the rest of my life because I am a chatty person. And think about something like design thinking is something that I've become very passionate about off late.
Okay, what is design thinking?
Design thinking is a framework it's a mental model. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of approaching problems and being critical with the way you solve those problems. It's a framework for solving business problems, basically, right? Creative, artful, out of the box way of dealing with them. I've become a design thinking facilitator in the last 1 year discovered this wonderful approach that I didn't know about. And now I'm hooked. What if I'm talking about something entirely new when I'm 28? People will still recognize me for what I've said now because it's associated to such a prestigious platform. And I don't think that's...
Or you may get invited for a second round for updated conversation.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure about that. Maybe that's a pipe dream. Yeah.
What is the role of a pace of speaking when you're presenting? So sometimes people speak fast, sometimes people really speak slow. What seems to be the... I don't think there's like a one size fits all answer to this. What I'm trying to ask you is, many of us end up speaking fast. Okay. And then I have read that you have to learn to slow down. But the risk that you anticipate as a speaker when you're speaking slow is you do not know, are you sounding or are you making sense? Are you too slow? Because in your mind, time is completely at a standstill while you're or when the spotlight is on you. So what's your recommendation with respect to the pace?
Both. Always speak fast and slow. Use change in pace to be able to change the flow of energy in the audience's minds. If I'm slowly talking to you right now, you're anticipating something that's going to come up next. And then suddenly there's a boom and then I reveal the secret and then we're all having a great time again. Right? So that slow down in pace and that sudden surge in energy again translates into theatrical effects in the audience that really takes your information along.
When should someone slow down?
When you're approaching maybe a punchline. Atal Bihari Vajpayee used to do this brilliantly.
He used
to slow down right to the slowest speed one could speak, and then he used to pause for 10 good seconds. No pause is long enough for him. And then the general assumption is when somebody uses silence in their speech, people shut off. But it's actually the opposite. Whenever Vajpayee slowed down and paused, my parents would increase the volume of the TV because they were hanging on to every single word he said next. So, yeah, slow down before you want to say something emphatic.
And when do you speed up?
When you want to cause a sudden rush in energy in the audience and want to get them excited.
What would be a good example?
What I just did. I slowed down and I said, I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to tell you a secret. Don't tell anyone. What? This guy went and did that. Right? So that flow of energy is fascinating to me.
And this is something, again, people have to cultivate with practice in case if they are not a seasoned speaker. Right?
Yep. It's like playing an instrument, for example. You play the keyboard. You start off as a youngster and you're playing really slow. You're getting every note and then you become better and eventually you get faster and faster. And then you reach what you feel like is the final step, and you're playing really fast and you're having a good time and you're flexing to others and saying, look how fast I'm playing the keyboard. Then you look at the maestros have a combination of delicate touch, slow notes and fast notes. It's all magical.
Yeah,
it's a combination.
Complete sync.
Yeah.
Now we have come to a time wherein the tools of communications have changed, especially with the new way, the new normals. So when you talk about video calls like Zoom, Teams, it makes communication tougher. Okay, earlier you had in-person communication. You can really gauge by the body language.
Correct.
Okay, now it's become extremely tough. So the best communications which used to have, or the people who have really good communication skills, they have a greater advantage with the current setup as compared to somebody who is not a communicator at all. If you're a communicator, you have good communication skill, you really can shine in this time because you already have those skill sets.
The current setup also hasn't been fair to people who are introverts and who generally aren't great at communicating. The current setup the virtual setup has made it harder for introverts to communicate. First of all, if your meetings can be emails, then please do that. Don't have 1 hour long meetings.
Don't torture people with that.
Don't torture people for meetings. In fact, I'm associated with the L&D team, learning and development team at Cisco, and we design creative modules and train tech leads, managers. And we recently had a session where we were talking to a bunch of tech leads about how to be more engaging with their teams. The current setup is the same as the setup we had in office. We booked a boardroom, we went inside, we had those conversations. That exact same template, we have lifted it and pasted it in our virtual setup, doing tremendous injustice to people who are not good at communicating. In virtual meetings, we see there is so much awkward silence. We have to call on people. We have to say, are you there? Please unmute yourself. There is so much awkward energy. The setup is just not built and ready for people in the virtual scenario. Do you have a host for the meetings? No. Do you have somebody who's taking minutes of the meetings? Designated person taking minutes of the meetings? No. Do you have somebody who's running through the slides? One designated person sharing their screen and running through the slides? No. It's all very ad hoc, the way it would be in a regular meeting. The structure just falls through. It's like a deck of cards that just falls through. People are just not ready to have productive conversations when it's all ad hoc. You're constantly being reactive. So have a structure, put a structure in place that will immediately fix the quality of your virtual meetings. Have a host, have a designated person to take minutes of the meetings, have a person who is going to be delivering, one person who is going to be delivering the presentations every week, and then everyone else use the meeting as a sounding board to chalk out and iron out ideas.
Yeah, true. I think there is no thought given to the meeting in advance. There is no planning which is involved. And people just show up just if they're showing up into a conference room. And they're trying to figure out, and they go with the assumption that it's all going to work out.
True.
And then there is a lot of chaos in understanding who's doing what. Does first impression still matter when you're actually... Imagine, let's not take a situation where it is only corporate. Let's say if you are a presenter and then there's an audience on the other side. This could be anybody who's a freelancer, somebody who is pitching for a sales. So first impressions in a virtual world, no, now we do not have a handshake right now. Now it is like, how's your Zoom setup? Or what's your background like? So does it still matter, first impressions in a video call?
I think so. I think it does definitely matter. Professionalism is conveyed by the kind of setup you have, by the first statements you utter, by how calm and composed you are. That immediately forms an impression in the mind of the listener. And especially in the virtual world, perception is everything. You're not really meeting people, so you're just going off of perceptions.
What can one do to really have a great first impression in a video setup?
I'm glad you said video setup, because people tend to switch off their videos. People tend to loaf on virtual meetings. A lot of your body language is conveyed through video. A lot of your communication happens through your body language. If you eliminate video, you're just guessing. You're just confidently guessing what the other person means based off of the tone of their voice, based off of the choice of words. So what you're technically saying is you're so confident in your team's ability to communicate words that you're okay not looking at them. So I think, first of all, good you mentioned video meetings. Have your video on. Have maybe a clear background. Don't look down or look up at the camera. Have the camera at a steady angle, looking straight at your face. And use the latest gen technologies like noise cancellation. Let's not have dogs barking in the background or the cooker whistle going off in your homes. Use all of the technology at your disposal. Virtual backgrounds, noise cancellation, mute when you are not speaking. All of those. There's now a whole set of virtual meeting etiquettes that you need to follow. There's many blog posts on these on LinkedIn, on medium.com. I could link those in the show notes. But there are these etiquettes, virtual meeting etiquettes that you need to follow, and that will build a good first impression.
I think some great points because people still think... Sometimes it's so funny that people haven't even cleaned the lens of their cameras. And you think, when you look at the person, it seems like they're speaking from the cloud. It's like very foggy. I think very basic hardware upgrades and do whatever it takes, because it's a new way where it's your new workspace.
True.
So might as well invest in it properly and do it.
A good webcam costs you $1,500. Can you not invest $1,500 to look better on camera? So I think put in the money there. I think you wouldn't bat an eyelid if you were spending $1,500 on a bottle of whiskey.
Or on a movie.
Or go out for Starbucks coffee like 4 or 5 times a month.
Absolutely.
So invest in a webcam. Invest in a mic. I love the setup you have here. I wish to emulate this setup in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, buddy. When I was checking some of your past videos, there was one video, I think this was in the beginning of the lockdown period. I think you posted something which was very interesting and I think very relevant. You were speaking, we do not have an audience anymore, really. It's not like you have a Toastmasters club that you can really go and practice your ability to do public speaking. You do not have a community because now it's all, people have been encouraged not to really socialize as much. And you said we have a tool in our hand which can really hone our skills of getting good at speaking. Could you elaborate on that point, please?
Yeah. In fact, it was a conversation that I had with someone who's also an employee, not from the company that I work for, but he said, why do I need public speaking now? We're all at home. We're all not going to talk in front of big audiences. I don't need public speaking now. And that person was a manager. So I explained to him patiently that if you're a manager and you're leading a team of so many people, you need public speaking more than ever before to make up for lack of physical presence, right? How do we practice it? Now, I think virtual Toastmasters clubs have begun again.
Oh, really?
Lots of Toastmasters clubs that have taken their entire setup virtually. They do it on Zoom, and not sure how effective it is because I haven't been a part of any of those, so I don't want to pass any loose comments here. But I think the easiest way would be to use your phone camera. The thing we struggle with most is being put in a spot. When the spotlight falls on us, we immediately feel like, now it's an ancient psychological thing where your Neanderthal brain, which is sitting below your, latest software firmware upgrades over the, course of evolution, your Neanderthal old brain still feels that whenever the spotlight's on you, it's equivalent to being set apart from your pack. We're pack animals. We exist in
social settings.
In social settings. So when we're cast aside from a social setting, we feel like we're being attacked. And hence the heart rate goes up and we feel all of these nerves, right? A front camera of your phone emulates that spotlight. So when you feel like, okay, I need to send this video to 10 people, you want to get it right. 10 people are going to watch it and cast opinions on you. So you want to do a good job. In a rudimentary sense, in a basic sense, that front camera is emulating the setup of the spotlight. So use it, talk into your front camera. The best way to get better at public speaking in this virtual time would be to find 5 people you trust with their judgments, with their opinions, whom you don't mind getting bashed from. Create a WhatsApp group or Signal if you're on Signal now, and tell them that for the next 1 month, every day you're going to send them a 2-minute video. You want all of them to watch that video and tell you if they like it or not and what they liked and what they didn't like. On the 30th day, you'll find yourself at ease talking to your front camera and at ease talking in your team meetings because you've already been practicing in front of your front camera.
I think it's such a brilliant suggestion and tip, which people, I feel more frequently we've been part of these Zoom meetings and video calls. We got comfortable right now. Now there is a sense of really how to communicate. People have learned. But if this very exercise is done over a period of 30 days, I think you could be a master.
True.
Like you could be a pro. But
Very true.
I think that's a great tip.
Because every 1 week you may realize, oh, I've been doing this wrong. I need to change this about me.
Yeah, you get feedback.
Yeah.
And those 5 friends that you mentioned, if they become too critical, what should we do?
Find a new set of 5 friends. No, I'm just joking. Like on the onset, know that these are 5 people whom you can trust with their judgments. And if you have toxic friends, then you'll have to see someone else, not a public speaking coach.
Yeah, there is a very interesting symbol that Rahul showed in the video, which you can see when you have friends you really want to not appreciate much. You showed a very interesting symbol.
That's true. You can go back and watch that video. I flipped a finger at people who critically, badger you for no reason.
Yes. Yeah. Those are the disadvantages of our audio podcast. You got to deal with the audio and story narrations.
Yeah.
All right. When you walk into a room full of strangers, okay, you really have to be, and I'm talking in the context of if you are a speaker and a presenter, that's been the focus of the topic.
Right.
How do you really break ice and how do you really network with them? Sometimes you got to network with them ahead of the session starting. Sometimes you got to do it on the job where you're on the spotlight.
Right.
How do you network with them? How do you break the ice?
I see there to be 3 ways that I thought of while you were asking me this question. The first way would be if it's a peer setting, if it's like a social construct, you're meeting people your own age or people who are same league. Greet people with animation and energy, over the top energy.
Right.
Like, just because, go out to people and say, hey, how's it been? Dude, it's been such a long time, man. Fist bump, because COVID, So when you do that, the other person feels like, oh, this guy's actually happy to see me. It's a bit over the top, but that's okay. Let me give him back the same kind of energy and love. That's number one. Number two would be, if you don't know people, if you're in a strange sort of environment, if it's not people whom you've met before, total strangers, genuinely smile and be a pleasant person. Greet everyone with warmth. Heartwarming smile goes a long way. So just smile more. That's the second one. And the third one is the more important, is the game-changing one. It's one that I've used several times before. If I want someone's attention, I will talk about them, not about me. So go up to people if you're networking and genuinely be interested in their story. Because if you ask someone, if suppose I meet Manoj at a social gathering, at a cocktail party, I walk up to Manoj and I say, Manoj, I've been watching listening to all of your podcasts. It's amazing. How do you get these guests on? You've got such a cool list of people I want to listen to. I'm trying to build something like this on my own. Oh, how do you get these people to agree to come on the podcast with you? So suddenly, I'm talking about you and you feel like, oh, yeah, so I'm going to tell you, listen to me. But instead, if I walked up to you and I said, so I've been doing all of these events of late. Can you tell me how you do these XYZ things? I started with me.
Right.
Suddenly, you're not that interested in what I have to say anymore. So genuinely be interested in other people. Show them that you're looking to learn. Ask them for help. When you ask people for help at no real expense of theirs, they feel like they're doing you a favor. And that makes them feel more powerful. So they immediately drop their guard and do all these nice things for you that you didn't expect.
Amazing. I think those 3 points were golden, I think, man. I think the fact that you got to really up your energy with enthusiasm and really smile, genuinely smile, and take interest in talking to people in them, actually. So I think that will solve that problem of breaking that. There was one more question that I had, which I think, but you covered it, which is sometimes we are in a conversation or a situation where we feel we are talking to a group of people who are like way above our league. Okay. You feel like these guys are way smarter than me, man. So how do you blend in that kind of a setup, or should you just leave the place?
I've struggled with this, but I feel like I've found a trick or a hack. So when we do these design thinking sessions, it's at work especially. These are 4-hour long sessions where we're facilitating the entire workshop for people 10, 15 years older than I am. There's usually multiple trainers on the session, but there's usually people who are directors, who are senior managers, who are senior directors, vice presidents on the call. And they know so much more than you. You know nothing in comparison to them. You're a drop in the ocean and they are the ocean, you feel like, when you start that session. But what is the one thing that can get people to drop their guard is make them vulnerable. How do you make them vulnerable? In design thinking sessions, we ask them to do these silly childlike tasks. One such task is, we have this segment called ideation segment, where we just brainstorm and come up with ideas. General perception would be, if you're a senior manager on the session, you're thinking, this guy is somebody who joined 2 years back. What can he get me to do? What value can he add? But suddenly, if you put the spotlight on him, take that spotlight away from you and put that spotlight on the attendee and say, all right, so take a piece of paper and I'm going to count to 60. We're going to do a timer till 60 seconds. Using just 3 shapes, triangles, rectangles, and circles, draw all the images that come to mind. And suddenly they're like, oh, what just happened? Oh, you're asking me to do these things? Okay, 60 seconds, pressure. So suddenly they're vulnerable. Not only are you getting them to open up, you're also letting them know that there are certain things that they're not ready for. So they drop that high hat of theirs and they get ready to be more open and have that conversation. Yeah.
Wow. So this is what has happened in some of these setups where people have just completely let go of their guard.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay.
In fact, the end result, normally our end result of the session ends with a prototype phase. So design thinking is a 4-part segment. You start with empathy. When there's a problem, you understand the stakeholders' problems. So you empathize with them. After empathizing with their problems, you define their problem statement. You ideate, you brainstorm with them for possible solutions. You remove the duplicate ideas and just filter down all the ideas that you want. And then finally, you prototype them and test them. That's what design thinking is in a nutshell. So in the prototype phase, we would normally make a wireframe, or we would make a working model. We would put in a business process flow in place. But these are all things that leaders are comfortable with. So what did we do instead? We asked them to build a children's story explaining the solution to the problem. And these senior leaders, senior managers came up with a spin-off of Frozen, like the children's story Frozen, the movie Frozen. And they used characters from Frozen to explain the solution to their problem. And they had more fun than I could have imagined because they were vulnerable.
Right? And it works all the time.
It works most of the times, yeah. It also depends on how you're facilitating it and what sort of mood and mental state they're in. So yeah, it works most of the time.
And it could depend on that one person with that crossed arm. And
yeah, there's always that sniper in the audience who's just taking shots at you. So you've got to be careful of those.
So Rahul, what are some of the notable difference between an amateur and a pro when it comes to public speaking skills? You can instantly spot somebody who is not a pro and somebody who is a pro. What differentiates them?
Grace would be one thing, where they're easy on the eye. Take cricket, for example, right? What's the difference between somebody who's a debutant and somebody... Take Prithvi Shaw, for example, the recent test match.
I'm not a cricket fan.
Okay.
I'll go with that though.
I'll give you 2 examples. Right?
My audience maybe, but I am not so.
So take a debutant and a seasoned player. A seasoned player like Rohit Sharma. He's not under pressure. He is okay with failing that match. He has that immense reservoir of self-belief that a slump in form is in the end. And he's just having fun out there. He's just... Even Virender Sehwag used to sing while he used to play. And his body is relaxed. His shoulders are easy, not stiff. These same traits apply to public speaking or any other field, even for example, where you don't have that constant look of worry on your face, where you're anticipating the audience's response. A seasoned speaker does not anticipate the audience's response. They're just having a good time and they're in that trance sort of scenario. I often look at Led Zeppelin videos on YouTube, their videos, and all of them, they might be intoxicated when they were performing, but they're lost in a state of trance. They don't know they're performing. They're just at one with their instrument. They are not looking at the audience and saying, are you having a good time? A clap for me? No, that's not happening. There may be phases where they go out and engage with the audience, but normally when they're wrong, they're just lost.
They're in their own zone.
They're in their own zone. You cannot bring them back. It's a similar feeling with public speaking. There are often times when I've been on stage, when I've seen speak. In fact, I was speaking to a friend of mine who's also a speaker, and they said something on stage which caught my eye. And then I was supposed to go on and speak next. I spoke next. We finished the event. We went off to grab some coffee. And I was like, you said that one thing. And it caught my eye. So where did you read that? It's like, bro, I can't tell you. It was something I've never read before. It just came to me on stage. And I know he's not lying because those things have happened to me. You just have these moments of these sparks on stage and you just say things that you wouldn't have otherwise said, and it sounds beautiful. If you watch football, where did Messi take that goal from? Was he conscious? Was he aware? Was he 100% sure that ball would curve that way? No, sometimes it's just instinct. And that's the mark of a great speaker, when they're lost, when they're not there. When they're performing, they're not there. And you can tell. You can genuinely tell going by that grace.
Beautiful. I think also when you ask them, how did you say that? Precisely, they wouldn't even know how it's that moment when it happened. I think, that's a great differentiation between a pro and anything else that comes to mind when you think of that. But this is great. I think this really covers that. So,
anything else that comes to mind? Okay, let me see. Okay, we've covered this before, but the art of talking to an audience rather than talking at them. I've seen speakers go up on stage in front of 1,000 people in the audience, right? 1,000 people is an all different game. It's a different game altogether. Things can go wrong in a fraction of a second. So it's like tightrope walking, right? A small slip up and you've lost balance and you fall. A seasoned speaker will go up on stage and will casually talk to an audience as if he's chatting with a friend. You see 1,000 people, that doesn't deter the person. You're conversing with them. You're seeing 1,000 people as one.
Right.
You're having a chat with a friend, with an old friend. Take Russell Peters, for example, who's a stand-up comedian I've watched over the years. He is genuinely saying the harshest things possible to the audience, making fun of them, sometimes even racially profiling them. But the audience is laughing along because the audience feels like, hey, I'm his friend. He's having a conversation with me.
They feel a sense of connect with him.
There is that unbreakable sense of connect. And everyone's, even if it's a 1.5 hour show, everyone's hanging on to each and every word. That sort of trust is built up over that 1.5 hour segment. So that's one more trait and hallmark of a great speaker.
Yeah, great point, I think. Yeah, people feel privileged that they've been addressed that way. And pros really can make a joke at you and still get away with it with grace.
Yeah.
I think that's something amazing.
That's also a hallmark of a great stand-up comedian, where they'll say some of the darkest stuff. Yes, I am somebody who occasionally enjoys dark comedy, and they say some really horrible things that you would not dare to say outside in society, but you laugh it off because the intent was clear.
Whom do you like in the Indian comedy scene?
In the Indian comedy scene, okay, this is interesting. I like Biswa. He's good Hindi stand-up comedy. He had this recent course on Front Row where he teaches people how to do stand-up comedy. I enrolled for that course, although I haven't completed it. Hooked through and through. Great stand-up comedian. I like Kannan Gill in English stand-up comedy because I feel he's smart and clever and I appreciate that in a stand-up comedian, not just slapstick humor. I like Kenny Sebastian in terms of relevance. I think Kenny Sebastian is more relevant than he is funny. And it shows that relevance can sometimes make an audience a fan.
Those guys are Bangalore based, I think. Huh?
All Bangalore boys, apart from Biswa, of course. Biswa is from Orissa.
So who are some of the speakers that you really, have learnt most from? Yeah, you really look up to? These are the speakers, man.
This is an overused example, of course, but Barack Obama. Talk show, presidential debate, press conference. He is so at ease every damn place.
Absolutely, yeah.
And if he goes on, if it's a press conference, every word he says is correct. Word, right time. If it's a presidential debate, he's aggressive. At the same time, not obnoxious and not obscene. Not like the Trump and Hillary debate, not like the Trump and Biden debate. It was elegant. When he's on a talk show, when he's on Ellen's show, he's just exuding coolness. The cool quotient is so high.
Right.
He's embracing the fact that he likes dad jokes. He's embracing everything, all of his natural traits. So I think that's the biggest lesson I've learned from Barack Obama is that first understand who you are and embrace that through and through. If you have flaws, embrace those as well.
Celebrate it almost.
Celebrate it, right? Yeah.
That's a great example. Wow. Anybody else?
I like Simon Sinek.
He's a powerful speaker, man.
Very powerful. So much energy and so much passion. You can see that passion coming through to you from your laptop or computer screen. Right. That's somebody I generally like. One more speaker that I like is Shashi Tharoor in the way that he's so eloquent. I love I may not agree with all of his ideas, but I love the way he speaks and I'm a fan of the way he uses the language of English.
Speaking about language, so we will touch a little on words. Okay, so words when used properly really create unimaginable power and influence with the people that you're addressing. Okay, how can we really build the ability to craft beautiful words in our speeches, in our presentations, in our talks? How do we really hone that?
I remember you asking me a question earlier, which was, what do you fear? Like, what is something you wished you started earlier? I wish I started reading as much as I am now earlier. And I think reading is a great way to build an armory of unbreakable, unshakable words. although reading is a great way, not everyone may enjoy it, not everyone may embrace it. I've started reading a lot off late in the last 4 or 5 years, maybe, but not so much before. But my source of great words is conversations, videos, people whom I have chats with. When I go out and talk to a friend and they say that I intuitively hang on to words that I don't know. I go back home, Google them and make them in my own context, in my own way of saying things. Yeah.
And so reading is a great resource to really build that arsenal of words. Okay?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And videos and
Yeah.
other audio formats.
Right. If you're somebody who's struggling with the English language, I would suggest watch sitcoms. You're having a good time as well as picking up some of the colloquial words that you could use in conversations.
Right. I think the magic there is, as you are enjoying this whole process, as you said about the stage experience, you end up using these words unconsciously.
Yes.
It just suddenly comes from nowhere, right?
Yes.
And then because it is working on your psyche at some level or on your subconscious.
The last word I picked up was the word hackneyed is an alternative for badgered or overused.
Ah.
I was wondering, where did I pick up hackneyed from? I've not read anything. I've not watched anything on video. But I was talking to this one friend on my WhatsApp call and she kept saying hackneyed. I was like, oh, that's where I picked it up from. So sometimes you don't even realize where you picked it up from, and that's what sitcoms could also do. You're
Right.
having a good time as well as learning.
Yeah, and you end up picking up phrases also sometimes. Those kind of words which a friend constantly uses, you end up having the same effect on.
Yeah. So if you have friends who constantly say macha, machi, you will also end up saying macha, machi. That's it. Obviously, just making a joke there.
By the way, for my international audience, what does macha and machi mean?
So macha is bro. In a literal sense, macha is brother-in-law. Okay. It's like saying sale in Hindi for the
Right.
North Indian audience. But macha could be used as bro here in Bangalore.
Yeah, and that's a sign of you feeling very comfortable with the
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
person. Okay. Have you had imposter syndrome? Okay, and if yes, how did you deal with it? And also, could you explain what is the imposter syndrome?
Imposter syndrome is where you feel like you are being perceived to be an expert, but you don't think you are. You feel like you're having to live up to that image that's been already built of you.
Right.
So that's imposter syndrome, and many of us deal with it, especially creators these days deal with it a lot, because sometimes you put out work there as something you enjoy doing and suddenly it blows up and people are looking up at you and saying that you are an expert in this domain. You didn't ask for that expert tag, but suddenly here you are, where people are now weighing every word you're saying, and sometimes you say something wrong and people are like, how could you, being an expert, say something so irresponsible?
And internally, you also do not feel you are eligible to be called that title. So,
You like it,
Yeah,
but
you
at the
like
same
it.
time you feel like somewhere you don't deserve it.
yeah, you're a fake somewhere inside. Right?
You feel like a quack, you feel like one of those scam artists, a charlatan. But earlier we spoke about where we feel inadequate with senior folks, with people who are so much more experienced than us, senior directors or vice presidents at a company. That's what I dealt with it in 2020 and 2019, where I was doing sessions for managers and senior managers, and the certain feeling crept in that, am I really worth my mettle? Are these people really, do they have something to learn from me? Really? They're so much more senior than I am. But then the reminder that whatever isn't public information, that helps. If I know 10 things, 10 different people may know one thing each, but not a single person knows all those 10 things that I know. So if you're if you're conversing to someone who is much more senior than you, and you feel your imposter syndrome kicking in at full flow, remind yourself that they may know 1 or 2 things that you already know, but there are 8 different things that you can add that only you are privy to, information that only you are privy to. So this reminder helps. Also, I'm somebody, like I said, I've been shameless before. I am shameless, and I have an immense sense of self-belief. So I don't deal with imposter syndrome. I don't struggle with it as much. But when I do, these reminders help.
Great point, yeah. I think. Okay, I have few more questions and then we'll be done with the session.
Awesome.
What is something that very few people are talking about right now, but everyone will be speaking about it maybe 1 year from now?
It's a deviation from my current topic.
Yeah.
But I think having an emergency fund. I attended a session recently where Neeraj Dugar is somebody who goes by Contrarian Living on Twitter, who conducted him and Abhishek Agarwal, who is a venture capitalist for startups, conducted a session on emergency funds. It was moderated by Nikhil Joyce, and they spoke about how, especially in 2020, during the COVID times where people were unemployed, the heightened sense of the emergency fund requirement came into the picture. And it will come into the picture again in future as we move more and more into the gig economy, where you're moving away from traditional jobs and moving into more creative fields. You need to have a dam or a reservoir that you can bank on, and that's having an emergency fund. People will talk about this more, I feel.
Wow, what a great point, man. I think very legit observation. I think people firsthand experienced the need to have some kind of a reserve when they really hit the dead end point. That's a great point. What's the best compliment that you have received from somebody?
That I'm pretty? No, I'm kidding. That's not true. The best compliment I've received from someone is that I'm a good judge of character, that I have good people skills, and that I am better at dealing with nagging issues than the average person. That's the best compliment I feel like I've received, and that's when my imposter syndrome also kicked in. I feel like that's not me. But I think that's the best compliment I've got so far. And to an extent, I feel like that is justified, because as a speaker, you get to look at new audiences every single day, and you generally know what intentions the listener has in mind.
Interesting. Okay. Who do you trust and really depend on for important life decisions?
My dad. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's one such person who brings me back on track, gives me constant reality checks. That's one person for sure. Yeah.
Okay. And how does he do that? And that's a very interesting, because people, like when I ask this kind of question, generally it's someone outside of the family. So it's interesting to hear that you look up to him for sound judgment. Why is that?
It's because I've had countless number of incidents where he told me something. I went ahead and ignored his judgment anyway, fell down, came back and said, "You were right." And he still reminds me to this day, and he'll come to me and tell me something that I'm totally uncomfortable with. He'll come and give me a bitter pill. And I'm like, "No, that's not true. That can't be true." And now it's become a habit where he says, 10 days. I give you 10 days, you will come back. So it's happened enough number of times for me to know better.
Could you tell us a little about your dad?
So he is 51 years of age, right? He's been a serial entrepreneur all his life. He is a civil engineer by profession. At the same time, he's somebody whom I've imbibed a lot of values. My love towards philosophy and human nature, personality comes from him. He's an incredibly real person. He's a realist. He's rationally optimistic, but he's also somebody who comes with his share of skepticism at times. He's provided me a lot of balance in my life. Whenever I get too carried away, brings me back on track. So that's a bit about my father. And there's a fun fact. He was the person who pushed me on stage to become a speaker when I was a kid. But after I became a professional speaker, he has not, and he still refuses to attend any of my gigs.
Really?
He has not watched me perform since the time I was maybe 12.
And why is that?
It's a funny incident. It was in my first standard, and I was taking part in the school sports day in a 100-meter race. And he tells me, I don't remember it. He tells me that I was winning.
Okay.
He was in the audience cheering me on, and he waved at me, and I stopped to wave back at him.
Oh, man.
And I lost the race. So, and I apparently laughed it off, and he was like, "No, you could have won that race. What's wrong with you?" And I said, "No, it's okay. I was leading." So
Right.
he tells me this every now and then, and he's like, "That's why I don't want to come watch you perform."
Oh, man. Okay.
And I was acting in a play in 9th grade, which is the last event he's watched me at. And it was 3 days. It was 3 shows on 3 different days I was doing. And it was a big production, expensive. I was in costume, makeup and everything. You couldn't recognize me. He didn't tell me which day he was coming on.
So that.
He didn't tell me. And he sat somewhere at the back, apparently. And my parents, my mum and my rest of my family were sitting in front. But he didn't tell me which day he came on. I still don't know which day he came on.
So do you agree with his observation that in case he shows up at an event, you will be losing focus and like getting all excited that dad is around?
I'll definitely want to prove a point. That may get me carried away. I definitely want to prove a point and say, you know what? All these years that you didn't come watch me was worth nothing. So look at me, watch me. That's probably what I'll do, and it might end up hampering my performance.
Interesting. Okay. Could you tell us a little about your mom?
So my mom is the most cheerful person I've met. Like the energy, the vibrance that I give away now. Like my dad can come across as a cold person sometimes, but the energy, the vibrance that I exude on stage comes from my mother. She's somebody who is hyper social. She loves people. She loves hanging out with people all the time. She's somebody who's very giving in nature. Speakers are giving in nature. I think I've imbibed that quality from her. And she's my biggest cheerleader. In fact, even if I'm wearing the ugliest of clothes, she'll tell me, no, you're looking nice. So I can't take her judgment as a gold standard.
But she's always loving.
But she's always there. She's always there as a rock, as a supporter. Yeah. So
amazing.
That's my mother. Yeah.
All right. You mentioned about books a couple of times and you started reading lately. Can you mention a couple of books that has been super influential in the way it has shaped your thinking?
Habit Formation, Atomic Habits, any day.
James Clear.
James Clear. Loved that book. I'm planning to give that a reread. There was my go-to book about money has been an ancient classic, obviously, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. I'm obviously giving you popular book names now.
Yeah.
And maybe a third book. Okay. This is a book I read recently. I wouldn't say it's top 3 books, but it's a book I've read recently, so it's fresh in my mind. It's about how much we have wrong about the world. Our perceptions about the world are so skewed. It's a book called Factfulness by Hans Rosling. Loved that book. There's a quiz at the beginning of the book, 13 questions, and it tests your knowledge about the world.
Right.
I got 4 of them, and it was pathetic. I felt like, it's the worst performance ever. And turns out people answer even less. So
I think it's an interesting book. Even I've read the book, and there is a graph at the end of the book where it shows
correct
the different the metrics about income and countries and things like
Correct.
that. It's quite an interesting read.
In fact, it talks about a lot of the things that we have wrong today on social media as well. Everybody wants to belong to a tribe. You're either left or you're right. But sometimes the truth isn't black or white, it's gray. So nuanced arguments are going amiss. And nuance is where the truth lies.
And it's completely driven by the narrative of the media. They want a certain narrative, so they want to, it's like almost agenda driven.
True.
Right? So,
True. It's also the fact that media is only doing their job, and over the years, media wasn't always this important. Media wasn't our source of everything. But today it is. That's why the problems are arising, is what Hans Rosling says, and I agree with him.
Okay. Any other book that has been instrumental in, you said you're reading something Stoic?
I just finished Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It's his notes on life. Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor, and he lived most of his life through the plague. So it's very relevant to the times we're living in right now. People wouldn't step out, people wouldn't mingle a lot back then. It was more of his personal journal, his thoughts before going into war, his thoughts about family, his thoughts about marriage, sex, food, the mind, the body, all of it. You get a direct look into a Roman emperor's mind, which is great.
All right, Rahul. I think I have covered most of the things I really wanted to ask you. I was very nervous sitting before meeting you because the art of really articulating yourself and asking questions also, I feel very judged in the front of a professional like you. So, so glad that I had this conversation. I really got some great insights on this whole topic. And I think our listeners will definitely have a lot of things to note down, practice. Any final thoughts that you have?
No, first of all, I would like to thank you for covering such a wide range of topics, and was very comprehensive, the kind of questions that you asked. In fact, in between, we went off script many a times. That shows that you actually got me thinking, and it wasn't templated and ready-made answers a lot of the times. I had to, really rack my brain to answer those. So thank you for that. I think the one thing I want to tell the people listening is that communication is not a soft skill. Our common perception is that it's a soft skill. It's as solid as your hard sciences. Communication sometimes equals cold hard cash. And think about an interview. If you do not impress the interviewer, you don't get the job.
Right.
So your communication skills could be the make or break. And we're living in an era where all jobs are being automated, and the jobs left behind are the ones that deal with changing minds. It's everything. And it's equivalent to a superpower, so embrace it. And there's no age barrier. You can always pick it up. So there's no plug at the end saying, now is the time, learn now, attend my next workshop. That's not gonna it's just an emphasis on the importance that it has in my life and everyone else's.
I completely agree. I think that's a great point to close. People definitely should not underestimate what honing this skill can really, transform their life. Actually, the opportunities really flow in when you really get good at your skills of communication.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so where can people find more about you? Where are you most active, and where can people see the man behind the mic?
I'm most active on Instagram and Twitter. You can reach out to me on both places. And on both places, I have a link plugged in where you can find all of my other content. If you want to check out my website, you can head over to www.rahulkolle.com. If I have any workshops coming up, I usually update it there. So you can find me there. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Rahul. It's been a blast.
Thank you, Manoj. Loved every bit of it.
Cool. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the show. All the key points discussed will be available in the show notes at www.rareerth.com. That is RareErth.com. Yes, there is no A in that. Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you really liked and enjoyed the show, please do give me your feedback, review, and rate it on iTunes or any listening app of your choice. Do subscribe and share with your friends. Thank you.